Welcome back. So today we're going to read part 2 of The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. So if you remember in our last section, the father, George, had come across his old wallet in the nursery where he had discovered that there were lions and an African Veldt, and then the kids quick and ran and changed it. But he had found his wallet and it had been chewed on by the lions and it had blood on it and saliva. So these very fake lions that are supposed to be just holograms are actually doing real damage and leaving real evidence behind. All right, so that's basically where we're picking up today. So part 2, section 5. In the middle of the night, he was still awake, and he knew his wife was awake. "Do you think Wendy changed it?" she said at last, in the dark room. "Of course." "Made it from a veldt into a forest and put Rima there instead of lions?" "Yes." "Why?" "I don't know, but it's staying locked until I find out." "How did your wallet get there?" "I don't know anything," he said, "except that I'm beginning to be sorry we bought that room for the children. If children are neurotic at all, a room like that, it's supposed to help them work off their neuroses in a healthful way. I'm starting to wonder." He stared at the ceiling. "We've given the children everything they ever wanted. Is this our reward? Secrecy? Disobedience? Who is it said, 'Children are carpets. They should be stepped on occasionally'? We've never lifted a hand. They're insufferable, let's admit it. They come and go when they like. They treat us as if we're offspring. They're spoiled, and we're spoiled." All right, so he says this phrase, "children are carpets. They should be stepped on occasionally." All right, so he's got this phrase that he says here, and it's basically that idea that you shouldn't literally walk on your children as if they are carpets, but you should discipline them once in a while, is what he is saying. And I don't mean this by physical discipline or something like that, but the fact that these children have never been told no in their lives, and these parents have spoiled their children rotten. Their children have now become like the parents, and the parents have become like the children. The kids are obviously taking over the house, and the parents are not too terribly comfortable with this. "They've been acting funny ever since you forbade them to take the rocket to New York a few months ago." "They're not old enough to do that alone," I explained. "Nevertheless, I've noticed they've been decidedly cool towards us since then. I think I'll have Dr. McLean come tomorrow morning to have a look at Africa." "But it's not Africa now. It's Green Mansion's country in Rima." "I have a feeling it'll be Africa again before then." A moment later they heard screams. 2 screams. 2 people screaming from downstairs. And then a roar of lions. "Wendy and Peter aren't in their rooms," said his wife. He lay in his bed with his beating heart. "No," he said, "they've broken into the nursery." "Those screams, they sound familiar." "Do they?" "Yes, awfully." And although their beds tried very hard, the 2 adults couldn't be rocked to sleep for another hour. A smell of cats was in the night air. So this is kind of a situation. So they know the kids have broken into the nursery, but they don't go do anything about it. They stay in their bed listening to the screaming and the sounds. And the mother is saying the screams sound familiar. So it makes you wonder who is in there and who is screaming and why. What's going on in that nursery, and why did the kids break into it, and how were they able to break into it? All right, section 6. "Father," said Peter. "Yes." Peter looked at his shoes. He never looked at his father anymore, nor at his mother. "You aren't going to lock up the nursery for good, are you?" So take a look at that phrase in bold. So why do you think he does this? Why do people not look other people in the eyes? This is very telling when this child will not look his parents in the eye anymore. Usually people won't look someone in the eye if they feel guilty, if they feel ashamed, if they know something is coming about that person, or they know something about that person that that other person does not know or is not aware of. So this is a situation that it's very small reaction, but it should tell you a lot. That Peter is hiding something, and there's something in his feelings, in his mind, that causes him to never look his father in the face. So he says, "You aren't going to lock up the nursery for good, are you?" "Well, that all depends." "On what?" snapped Peter. "On you and your sister. If you intersperse this Africa with a little variety, Sweden, perhaps, or Denmark, or China. I thought we were free to play as we wished. You are, within reasonable bounds. What's wrong with Africa, father?" "Oh, so now you admit you've been conjuring up Africa, do you?" "I wouldn't want the nursery locked up," said Peter coldly. "Ever. Matter of fact, we're thinking of turning the whole house off for a month. Live a sort of carefree, one-for-all existence." "That sounds dreadful! Would I have to tie my own shoes instead of letting the shoe tire do it? And brush my own teeth and comb my own hair and give myself a bath?" "It would be fun for a change, don't you think?" So if you stop and think about all these things that this child has just said, the house literally does everything for them, including tying their shoes, brushing their hair, and their teeth, dressing them, giving themselves a bath, like all these things that we do on a daily basis for ourselves, this house does for them. And this child is now getting to a point where he is threatening, where he says, "I wouldn't want the nursery locked up ever." And now he's being told that, his addiction in a way is going to be taken away. So how do you think he's going to react to that? It's not going to be good. So his father says, "It would be fun for a change, don't you think?" "No, it would be horrid. I didn't like it when you took out the picture painter last month." "That's because I wanted you to learn to paint all by yourself, son. I don't want to do anything but look and listen and smell. What else is there to do?" "All right, go play in Africa. Will you shut off the house sometime soon?" "We're considering it." "I don't think you'd better consider it any more, father. I won't have any threats from my son." "Very well." And Peter strolled off to the nursery. All right, so here again, the father has the opportunity to set down some discipline, not allow the children into the nursery, and because the son is whining and making threats, he just lets him go play. All right, but then you have the son, he says, "I don't think you'd better consider that anymore." So he's basically threatening his father with what we don't know yet. But once again, here is the child setting up the discipline, and the father kind of taking the bait. Section 7. "Am I on time?" said David McLean. "Breakfast?" asked George Hadley. "Thanks, had some." "What's the trouble?" "David, you're a psychologist." "I should hope so." "Well then, have a look at our nursery. You saw it a year ago when you dropped by. Did you notice anything peculiar about it then?" "Can't say I did. The usual violences, a tendency toward a slight paranoia here and there, usual in children because they feel persecuted by parents constantly, but really nothing." They walked down the hall. "I locked the nursery up," explained the father, "and the children broke back into it during the night. I let them stay so they could form the patterns for you to see." There was terrible screaming from the nursery. "There it is," said George Hadley. "See what you make of it." They walked in on the children without rapping, meaning knocking on the door. The screams had faded. The lions were feeding. "Run outside a moment, children," said George Hadley. "No, don't change the mental combination. Leave the walls as they are. Get." With the children gone, the two men stood studying the lions clustered at a distance, eating with great relish whatever it was they had caught. "I wish I knew what it was," said George Hadley. "Sometimes I can almost see. Do you think if I brought high-powered binoculars here and—" David McLean laughed dryly. "Hardly." He turned to study all four walls. "How long has this been going on?" "A little over a month." "It certainly doesn't feel good." "I want facts, not feelings." "My dear George, a psychologist never saw a fact in his life. He only hears about feelings, vague things. This doesn't feel good. I tell you, trust my hunches and my instincts. I have a nose for something bad. This is very bad. My advice to you is to have the whole damn room torn down and your children brought to me every day during the next year for treatment. Is it that bad? I'm afraid so. One of the original uses of these nurseries was so that we could study the patterns left on the walls by the child's mind, study at our leisure and help the child. In this case, however, the room has become a channel toward destructive thoughts instead of a release away from them. Didn't you sense this before? I sensed only that you had badly spoiled your children more than most, and now you're letting them down in some way. What way? I wouldn't let them go to New York. What else? I've taken a few machines from the house and threatened them, a month ago, with closing up the nursery unless they did their homework. I did close it for a few days to show I meant business. Aha! Does that mean anything? Everything! Where before they had a Santa Claus, now they have a Scrooge. Children prefer Santas. You've let this room and this house replace you and your wife in your children's affections. This room is their mother and father, far more important in their lives than the real parents, and now you come along and you want to shut it off? No wonder there's hatred here. You can feel it coming out of the sky. Feel the sun, George. You'll have to change your life. Like too many others, you've built it around creature comforts. Why, you'd starve tomorrow if something went wrong in your kitchen. You wouldn't know how to tap an egg. Nevertheless, turn everything off. Start new. It'll take time, but we'll make good children out of bad in a year. Wait and see. All right, so we kind of have to look at this idea of what is the Hadleys' biggest mistake with this house? What have they done wrong? All right, the idea that George McLean is saying they've spoiled them. All right, and this is also that idea of the dangers of technology when we become too dependent on it. You also have that problem of when it fails you, then do you know how to recover and how to get around that failure to make something else work for you instead? So when your internet fails and you can't do your schoolwork, do you have a way around that? If not, then that's going to affect your schoolwork. Okay, that's going to affect your grades. It's going to eventually affect your attendance and things like that. So when our technology fails us in some way, shape, or form, then we have to either be resilient and find a way around it, or we have to kind of suffer the consequences. All right. So he says, we'll make good children out of bad in a year. Wait and see. But won't the shock be too much for the children, shutting the room up abruptly for good? I don't want them going any deeper into this, that's all. The lions were finished with their red feast. The lions were standing on the edge of the clearing, watching the two men. Now I'm feeling persecuted, said McLean. Let's get out of here. I never cared for these damned rooms. Make me nervous. The lions look real, don't they? Said George Hadley. I don't suppose there's any way— What? That they could become real. Not that I know. Some flaw in the machinery, a tampering or something? No. They went to the door. I don't imagine the room will like being turned off, said the father. Nothing ever likes to die, even a room. I wonder if it hates me for wanting to switch it off. Paranoia is thick around here today, said David McLean. You can follow it like a spore. Hello. He bent and picked up a bloody scarf. This yours? No, George Hadley's face was rigid. It belongs to Lydia. They went to the fuse box together and threw the switch that killed the nursery. So we have a couple of things going on in this last section. So George is afraid that this room is almost developing a mind and feelings to hate him, that the room wants him dead or harmed in some way. And now they've also found another piece of real property from the mother. There's a scarf there. So once again, the scarf has blood on it, most likely for the same reason the wallet does. All right. So these items aren't walking themselves in there, and there's only two people who are capable of putting these items in there. That would be the children. All right, but why would you think they would do this? What is their purpose? What are they trying to do? Think about it. If they're angry that their father has shut off the room and, he's become a Scrooge instead of a Santa, all right, now these children are going to start to rebel. And we know something's going on with these lions and that they are a lot more real than the parents actually think they are. So this is what we have to kind of think about as we move forward in this story. Section 8. The two children were in hysterics. They screamed and pranced and threw things. They yelled and sobbed and swore and jumped at the furniture. "You can't do that to the nursery. You can't." Now, children. The children flung themselves onto a couch, weeping. "George," said Lydia Hadley, "turn on the nursery, just for a few moments. You can't be so abrupt." "No." "You can't be so cruel." "Lydia, it's off, and it stays off. The whole damn house dies as of here and now. The more I see of the mess we've put ourselves in, the more it sickens me. We've been contemplating our mechanical, electronic navels for too long. My God, how we need a breath of honest air." And he marched about the house, turning off the voice clocks, the stoves, the heaters, the shoe shiners, the shoe lacers, the body scrubbers and swabbers and massagers, and every other machine he could put his hand to. The house was full of dead bodies, it seemed. It felt like a mechanical cemetery, so silent, none of the humming, hidden energy of machines waiting to function at the tap of a button. "Don't let them do it," Peter wailed at the ceiling as if he was talking to the house, the nursery. "Don't let Father kill everything." He turned to his father. "Oh, I hate you." "Insults won't get you anywhere." "I wish you were dead." "We were for a long while. Now we're going to really start living. Instead of being handled and massaged, we're going to live." Wendy was still crying, and Peter joined her again. "Just a moment, just a moment, just a moment of nursery," they wailed. Another moment. "Oh, George," said the wife, "it can't hurt." All right, if they'll just shut up. 1 minute, mind you, and then off forever." "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," sang the children, smiling with wet faces. "And then we're going on a vacation. David McLean is coming back in a half an hour to help us move out and get to the airport. I'm going to dress. You turn the nursery on for a minute. Lydia, just a minute, mind you." And the three of them went babbling off while he let himself be vacuumed upstairs through the air flue and set about dressing himself. A minute later, Lydia appeared. So even though he said he was shutting down the house, he's just given the kids free rein to go back into the nursery. And we know that they can control the nursery. Do you think this is going to end well? "I'll be glad when we get away," she sighed. "Did you leave them in the nursery?" "I wanted to dress too. Oh, that horrid Africa. What can they see in it?" "Well, in 5 minutes, we'll be on our way to Iowa. Lord, how did we ever get in this house? What prompted us to buy a nightmare? Pride? Money? Foolishness? I think we'd better get downstairs before those kids get engrossed with those damn beasts again." Just then they heard the children calling, "Daddy! Mommy! Come quick! Quick!" They went downstairs in the air flue and ran down the hall. The children were nowhere in sight. "Wendy? Peter?" They ran into the nursery. The Veldt land was empty, save for the lions, waiting, looking at them. "Peter? Wendy?" The door slammed. "Wendy! Peter!" George Hadley and his wife whirled and ran back to the door. "Open the door!" cried George Hadley, trying the knob. "Why, they've locked it from the outside. Peter!" He beat at the door. "Open up!" He heard Peter's voice outside against the door. "Don't let them switch off the nursery and the house," he was saying. Mr. and Mrs. George Hadley beat at the door. "Now don't be ridiculous, children. It's time to go. Mr. McLean will be here in a minute." And then they heard the sounds. The lions on 3 sides of them, in the yellow veldt grass padding through the dry straw, rumbling and roaring in their throats. The lions. Mr. Hadley looked at his wife, and they turned and looked back at the beasts edging slowly forward, crouching, tails stiff. Mr. and Mrs. Hadley screamed, and suddenly they realized why those other screams had sounded familiar. So chances are the kids were imagining a scenario in which their parents were in there with them, and they were training the lions to kill their parents. So they were having the wallet sent and the scarf sent. And so the lions, which have now kind of become real, got the scent of the parents. So they practiced killing them in hologram form. And now that the lions are real, they can kill them in real form. So that is why the screams sounded familiar. Section 9. Well, here I am, said David McLean in the nursery doorway. Oh, hello. He stared at the two children seated in the center of the open glade, eating a little picnic lunch. Beyond them was the water hole and the yellow Veldt land. Above them was the hot sun. He began to perspire. Where are your father and mother? The children looked up and smiled. Oh, they'll be here directly. Good. We must get going. At a distance, Mr. McLean saw the lions fighting and clawing and then quieting down to feed in silence under the shady trees. He squinted at the lions with his hand tipped to his eyes. Now the lions were done feeding. They moved to the water hole to drink. A shadow flickered over Mr. McLean's hot face. Many shadows flickered. The vultures were dropping down the blazing sky. Cup of tea? Asked Wendy in the silence. So essentially, the children got rid of their parents, and there's kind of an implication with the shadows flying over Mr. McLean's face. So yes, it's the vultures that are dropping down to eat their parents, or what's left of them, I should say. But there's kind of that shadow that they will most likely do the same thing to Mr. McLean, trick him, lock him in there with the lions. So we have to think about why they did this, and the idea that the children want to be able to run their own lives. They don't want adults telling them what they can and can't do. They're spoiled, and this is the consequence. They pretty much rid their entire life of the adults. And since the house is father and mother to these children to begin with, they don't need their real physical parents anymore. So because of that, they now have gotten rid of them. So we can definitely see that, yes, there are a lot of lovely things about this house. Unfortunately, the danger of having all that technology is that they became addicted to it and they stopped knowing how to live lives. The parents stopped knowing how to be parents. The children became addicted to their room, and when it was threatened that it would be taken away, they fought back. And unfortunately, their fight had, unusual violent consequences at this point.